All right, everybody, welcome back to our last lesson of chapter number 1. And this lesson deals with dividing of integers, so dividing of positive and negative numbers. Now, I'm going to go through this lesson fairly quickly due to the fact that they are the same rules apply for multiplication as they do for division. So remember that if we have I'm going to have us rewrite this a little bit. If there's an odd number of negatives, then your answer is going to be a negative answer. If there's an even number of negatives, then your answer is going to be a positive number. So remember, because we say that because there's not always just going to be two numbers, okay, or, to multiply or divide together. So if there's an odd number, it's going to be negative, even number is going to be positive. So let's kind of review this multiplication here. So again, I just do the math. 10 times 5 is 50. And then I count the negatives, and there's one negative, which is odd, so that's going to be a negative 50. 5 times 6 is 30. Count the negatives. There are two of them, so that makes it a positive 30. 8 times 9 is 72. There's one negative here, so that makes it a negative 72. And lastly, 15 times 7 is 105, and there's one negative, so that makes it a negative 105. Now, they get us started here by talking about counters again, all right, which is the same thing they were doing when we added and subtracted and all that stuff. So we're going to start with that, and we're going to take these negative 15 counters here, and we're going to divide those up into 3 equal groups. So that would be taking 5 negatives and putting them into 3 equal groups. So there's going to be 5 negatives in every group. So if I have a negative 15 and divide it by a positive 3, it actually comes out to be negative 5. Now, these rules should look very familiar to you because those are the same rules that we used when we did multiplication. So again, it's not always that there's going to be 2, right? So we got to think in terms of odd and even. So odd number. One more time, odd number of negatives makes it a negative answer. Even number of negatives makes it a positive number. And we've been talking about that over and over again now over these last 2 lessons. So just do the math again. 12 divided by 3 is 4. There's one negative, so that makes it a negative 4. 32 divided by 4 is 8. There's one negative in that problem, so that makes it a negative 8. 56 divided by 8 is 7. There are 2 negatives in that problem. Therefore, it makes it a positive 7. 45. Now, let's talk about this for a second. That fraction bar right there, that fraction bar is another way to represent division. And some of you, again, may have known that. Some of you may have not known that. So that fraction bar is just another way to say division. So if you have 45 divided by 9, you have yourself 5. And then there's one negative, so therefore that is a negative 5. 81 divided by 9 gives you 9. There is one negative, so that makes it a negative 9. And lastly, 144 divided by 12 is 12. And there are 2 negatives in that problem, so that makes it a positive 12. All right, now we're going to ramp up the difficulty a little bit here with using variables. Okay, variables in math are just letters to represent something, right? And they're representing, in this case, numbers. So the first thing that we're going to do here is we're going to plug in, we're going to substitute is the word they use, substitute in the number for the variable. So we're going to throw 8 in for x, and we're going to throw negative 4 in for y. And one of the things that helps me when I do these problems is I actually take out the variables and put in the numbers, and then I actually kind of rewrite it. All right, now, because in order to do this problem, there's a couple of different steps that I have to follow. And those steps are involved with what we call the order of operations. Okay, some of you might know it as PEMDAS. All right, Mr. GM and I will get into why we do not like PEMDAS here once you're in class. But again, we use order of operations. So the first thing in the order of operations is parentheses, and we really do not have any. I know some of you are thinking I have a parentheses right there. The only reason I put parentheses around the negative 4 is to separate it from the division sign. All right, so that's the only reason I'm doing that. So it's not together with that division sign. So actually the first thing I do in this problem is I do exponents. And what Mr. GM and I like to do is we like to underline what we're doing. Okay, so I'm only going to do one step at a time. So 8 to the second power is 8 times 8, which is 64. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring down everything that was not underlined. Okay, so that 8 to the second was the only thing that was underlined. So I did that, and then I brought everything else down. Now, after exponents, comes multiplication and division. So this right here is the second thing I'm going to do in this problem. So 64 divided by 4 is 16. But there was one negative in that problem right there, so that's going to be a negative 16. Now, everything that's not underlined, the 10 and the minus, I'm just going to bring down to the next part. Now, remember, this is a negative 16, so again, I like to separate that by using the parentheses. Now, what we've learned here is over the last couple of days is that we don't like to really do subtraction. A lot of kids will tell me that 10 minus negative 16, a lot of times I'll get negative 6, I'll get negative 26. But remember, we're going to talk about rewriting it to be an addition problem. So I'm going to make it 10 plus, remember how we add the opposite of negative 16. So that problem really becomes 10 plus 16. So my final answer to that problem is 26. Now again, it seemed like a pretty easy problem, but if you work it out, I think we don't make what we call careless mistakes then. All right. Next page, again, I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to plug in a negative 18 for the A, and I'm going to plug in a negative 6 for the B. So 18 divided by 6 gives us 3, and there were 2 negatives in that problem. Therefore, it makes it a positive. Next one, I'm going to plug in negative 18 for A plus 6, and I'm going to put that all over 3. Now, I'm going to do this top portion first. So I'm going to do negative 18 plus 6. So the bigger number is negative, so I know that answer is going to be negative. They have different signs, so I'm going to do the difference between those two, which is negative 12. And I'm going to throw that all over 3. Okay, now negative 12 divided by 3 gives us a final answer of negative 4. And now this last one here, we're going to put in a negative 6 for the B, and I'm going to square that, and I'm going to put that all over negative 18, and then we're going to add 4 at the end. So the first thing I have to do is I have to do this portion right here. All right, now in order to do this first, I'm going to have to figure out what negative 6 to the second is. So that again means negative 6 times negative 6, which comes out to be 36. And again, I'm going to keep that over negative 18, and then I'm going to add 4. So again, I'm just doing one thing at a time. Okay, so 36 divided by 18 is 2, but since there was one negative in that portion, my answer is going to be a negative 2, but now I still have to do the plus 4 at the end. And now negative 2 plus 4 gives me a positive 2. So again, seems like a lot of work there, but it's really just a couple of steps. But again, it assures me that I'm not going to mess up and make what I call a careless mistake. All right, last thing here is our word problem here to finish it. It says you measure the height of a tide using the support beams of a pier. Your measurements are shown in the picture. What is the mean hourly change in the height? So the first thing we have to talk about is what in the world is mean hourly change? Okay, the mean hourly change is represented by the final height minus the initial height. Okay, in other words, where it started, right? That's what the word initial means. Where did it start? Final height minus initial height. And then we're going to put that over what's called the elapsed time. In other words, how long did it take for the tide to move, to change? So the final height in this problem would be represented by the number 8. Okay, it's 8 inches after the tide went down. Now we're going to subtract where it started. It started at 59. And then we're going to put that over how long it took. And from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. is 6 hours. So that I'm going to choose to rewrite because I don't like, doing subtraction. I don't want to do 8 minus 59, so I'm going to rewrite it to be addition. 8 plus the opposite of 59, which is negative 59. And again, I'm going to keep that all over 6. So now, to do 8 plus negative 59 in my head, okay, the way I do it again is I look at, okay, the bigger number in this problem is 59. That is a negative number. They have different signs, so I'm going to find the difference between them. And 59 minus 8 is 51. So 8 plus negative 59 is negative 51. And again, I'm going to put that all over 6. Now, if you divide 51 by 6, a lot of kids have a hard time with that because you're not getting a whole number, right? 6 can't go into 51 evenly. So what we end up getting here is a negative, right? There's one negative in the problem. We end up getting negative 8, and what we would have is 3/6, which is 8.5. Or you could write it as a decimal and say negative 8.5. And then our label here would be inches per hour. So again, knowing our formula here at the top, right there, all right, and then making sure that we do our math correctly. And this one, again, doesn't always have to come out to be a whole number. It can be a mixed number or a decimal. All right, so hopefully that helps with division. Again, division is basically the same thing as multiplication. Just make sure you do the math.